The Dodge Dart was proof that it didn't cost a fortune to have the fastest muscle car on the block. If you were around in the 60s, around the drag strip that is, there was one thing you noticed right away. If two cars with identical engines raced, the lighter car won just about all the time. This was the whole idea behind the muscle car revolution. Putting top-of-the-line engines in medium-sized cars was a great idea, and it created some pretty fast cars. But for some people, even this wasn't enough. These people had to have more speed. They didn't care about luxury or a rich kid image. They just wanted to be first to the finish line. For these people, there was the Dodge Dart GT. The Dart GT was a perfect example of no frills, go fast. This car evolved from Dodge's first compact car into an all-world drag racer in just a few short years by offering more punch per pound than just about any other car of the muscle era. Performance like this doesn't happen if you're lugging around an extra 1,000 pounds of luxury options. But the Dart was no ugly duckling. Thanks to Dodge's styling department, between 1961 and 1967, the Dart evolved from a very plain Jane little grocery getter into a pretty stylish street machine. Mopar lovers took to this little car like hungry people to a $1.99 buffet. Over the next few years, Dodge stayed with this popular body style and continued to build more horsepower into the car. The 340 engine and Mopar's reliable 383 made this car a potent little street fighter. But the ultimate weapon of the 60s, the 426 Hemi, eventually found its way between the front fenders of the Dart, and that created a drag racing legend, the Hemi Dart.
The Dart was built as a race car. It was a real, legitimate, honest, off-the-showroom race car. You know, you could take it home, put some slicks on it, and put an oil pan on it, a bigger pan on it, and pretty much go race the car.
For years, the benchmark for Detroit performance had been 10 pounds of vehicle weight per horsepower. The average 383 Dart GTS beat this by a wide margin. The Hemi Dart obliterated it. While most other 60s muscle cars were straining to achieve this magic number, the street Darts rolled off the assembly line in fighting weight. The ones made for the strip were so light you could almost see through them, and this made for some wild times on the drag strip. Mopar racer Herb McCandless developed his own Hemi Dart driving technique.
People that said they really watched the tack in those cars, they were lying. Because what it became was rhythm. As the car peaked in low gear, you touch the clutch, pull second. Same situation into third, put it in high gear and look around, hope you were in front. That was the name of the game.
You'd have to expect a car like this from Dodge. Dodge was Chrysler's performance division, the home of the Ram Chargers racing team, and horsepower brokers since the early 50s. No other car company had more gung-ho racing fanatics on their payroll. Dodge's motto was, give the public what they want, and our public wants fast cars. The Dart GT, the GTS, the Dart Swinger, and the awesome Hemi Dart are evidence that Dodge wasn't interested in coming in second in any kind of race. We'll take a look at how the Dodge Dart became such a street favorite when the American muscle car returns. From hot rodding's earliest days, power-to-weight ratio was the supreme principle. But for years, that logic didn't compute in Detroit, for one basic reason. You couldn't make money on small cars.
Dealers want to sell you large cars that are full of content. In other words, they want to sell you the most loaded up, optioned out car that they can, simply because that's what they make most of the money on.
For decades, this big car mentality was the conventional wisdom, until a recession hit the country in the late 50s. All of a sudden, people were looking for smaller, less expensive cars. Detroit responded with a whole line of econo boxes, which all had one thing in common. They were as sparse as their big brother cars were luxurious. In 1961, Dodge hit the market with the Lancer. It looked like a 3/4 scale version of a full-size Dodge. It weighed around 2,600 pounds, and it sold for just about $2,000. The Lancer was powered by either a 170 cubic inch or a 225 cubic inch slant 6 engine. Definitely not a muscle power plant. But wouldn't you know it, those gearheads at Dodge even found a way to hot rod this little six-banger. The 225 Hyperpack Slant 6 could actually make more than 275 horsepower. By the mid-60s, compact cars were here to stay. But if little cars weren't going to go away, maybe there was a way to make them profitable.
Mustang GT, designed to be designed by you.
The Ford Mustang was really the first time that a manufacturer made a small car profitable. And of course, really profit's what drives everything. That's what makes the dealers push certain cars. Through the Mustang program, the dealers finally saw that they could indeed make money on small cars.
Once Dodge saw the Mustang's phenomenal success, they wasted no time jumping on the sporty car bandwagon. And it didn't take much to turn the Dart into a pretty cool little compact car. Thanks to its sporty looks and a few racy things like 4 on the floor, a sport steering wheel, and gauges, the Dart GT joined the Mustang and the Barracuda as the only other sport compact on the street. It's still stickered for around $2,400, but with extra cost options like a console, bucket seats, power steering, and air conditioning, you could run it up to nearly $2,800, which put the little car safely inside Dodge dealers' comfort zone. But by 1966, the big buzz on the street was not sport compacts. It was muscle cars. And Dodge's muscle cars were definitely not El Cheapo runabouts. About the only thing these cars had in common with the Dart was the Dodge emblem on the hood. When Dodge's styling department gave the Dart a sleek new look in 1967, for the first time the Dart looked like a muscle car. Its Hypo 273 cubic inch engine produced 235 horses. Good for a sport compact, but definitely not a muscle car. But the Dart GT did have a couple of very nice features. It weighed 500 pounds less than most muscle cars, and on most insurance forms, it was listed as a low-powered compact car. Dodge saw this as an opportunity to do something all new.
By the late 60s, one of the problems that everyone had with the muscle car movement was insurance companies started charging excessive premiums for all the displacement and horsepower that the muscle cars made. That led to the rise of the junior muscle car. That would be the small block powered muscle car. You got most of the visual flash of the traditional big inch muscle cars. However, the insurance companies classified these vehicles as compacts, and thus they had a very low insurance premium.
Help was on the way in the engine department too. In the pipeline was a real muscle Dart with all the go-fast goodies. But Dodge was going to need a little help to get it into the showrooms. We'll tell you that story when the American muscle car returns. In 1968, Dodge and Plymouth were the cars to beat in the door slammer classes. At most drag strips, a weekend meet was an infomercial for Mopar muscle cars.
The performance-minded people that sat in the stands, they saw the Chrysler cars win, and win on a regular basis. Those cars enabled a lot of people to get involved in a fast race car that wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise.
Muscle car buyers soon found the car dealers in their area that spoke their language and could get them the cars they wanted. Recognizing this good thing, some car dealers began to specialize in selling and servicing performance cars. One of the most famous of all these high-performance dealerships was Grand Spalding Dodge in Chicago, owned by Norm Krause, better known as Mr. Norm.
And then when we started the dealership, the whole dealership was keyed up to total performance. We ordered 50 of this at a time, 50 Ram Chargers, 13 to 1s, then the 12.5 to 1s, and then the 11 to 1s. We had them all coming into our place, and the only thing we ordered was performance cars.
High on Dodge's agenda was loading up the Dart GT with more horsepower. But at first, nobody thought this was possible. Nobody but a bunch of hot rodders at Mr. Norm's Grand Spalding Dodge, that is.
They promised us a Dart with a 383 or a 440 engine, and it never came through. He says, well, we wanted to give you a 383, but our engineers tell us it won't fit. I said, okay. And I went into the shop and I told Dennis, I said, get a Dart in here, get a 383. I want to know why this doesn't fit in the car. The next day he came in, he says, well, we got it in the car. I said, so what was the problem? He said, there was no problem. He says, the exhaust on the left side was a little too close to the steering coupler, so we put a heat deflector in there. So I called Detroit, I said, I got a 383 Dart for you. He said, Bob said, bring it down. I drove it to Detroit, pulled into Hamtramck there. He came down, looked at the car, drove it. He says, this is nice. He called up the engineers and he says, look what the kids from Chicago did. He says, oh, they put a heat deflector in there. He says, so why couldn't you?
Thanks to this high-performance R&D from Mr. Norm, in late 1967, Dodge issued the Dart GT with big block power. The 383 Dart was such a people-pleaser that for 1968, they unleashed the Dart GTS with two high-performance engines, the nasty 300-horse 383 or the all-new 340 small block. The small block 340 was one screamin' little engine. Its 275 rated horsepower was achieved with 10.5 compression, a 455 lift hydraulic cam, a single Carter Thermoquad 4-barrel carburetor, and dual exhausts. Getting Mopar's 383 into the Dart was a tight squeeze. It required the use of more restrictive exhaust manifolds, and because of this, it was downrated to 300 horsepower. But this rating helped keep the Dart on the low-risk page at most insurance companies. Dart lovers could now get their jollies by winding the 340 to 6,000 RPM in every gear, or they could jump in a 383 power GTS and light the afterburner on that torque monster. Either way, the Dart had become an e-ticket ride. And if you were lucky enough to be living in the Chicago area, you could still take your Dart back to Mr. Norm's for a little extra tweaking.
Now, when we sold a car, they became a member of Mr. Norm's Sport Club, and they got a free dyno tune. The car would put out 190, 200 horsepower on the car. They said, hey, this is supposed to put out 300. I said, not to worry, not to worry. Then we used to turn it off, and our guys used to curve the distributor, rejet the carburetor, and then we used to dyno the car after that was done, and then we'd put a load on it at 5,000 RPM. There was the gauge burying the needle at 325. You never seen such excited customers in your life. I used to get excited. Oh, it worked.
The 383 Dart's bare-knuckles approach didn't attract the six-way power seat crowd, but it lit up everyone who had a need for speed. And it made true Mopar believers out of a lot of folks who came to Mr. Norm's to trade in their Fords and Chevys.
When a fella came in with a GTO or a Mustang, or he came in with a Plymouth, we had a Bible that we kept on the parts department. We made him swear allegiance and admit to his mistake. You know, the customers went along with it. We took pictures of them. They made fun. They swore that they would never buy another Chevy or Ford, that they would come and buy, and a lot of them did. 90% of them all came back and bought their cars from us.
There's a downside to being a true horsepower addict, though. For these folks, there's never enough. It was this mindset that created the most awesome car of the muscle era, the Hemi Dart. We'll get inside this bonsai mobile when the American Muscle Car returns. Thanks to a nice shot of horsepower, the Dart had morphed into a pretty stout street machine, turning low 15-second times, or even mid-14s with drag strip tuning. This made the Dart an excellent, but not an awesome muscle car. At the very top of the awesome list were cars packing Mopar's ultimate weapon, the mighty Hemi. In mid-1968, Dodge was looking for an edge to give its superstock racing teams. The lightweight Dart and the racing version of the 426 Hemi were the makings of an all-world supercar. When Dodge combined these two volatile ingredients, they made a bomb. The Hemi Dart was not a car for the masses, and that was okay since they practically needed to be hand-built. stuffing the Hemi into the Dart's engine bay required some pretty radical modification. So Hurst Performance got the job of turning assembly line Darts into street-legal super stock race cars. Dart bodies without any sound deadener or seats were shipped to Hurst, with the engines and drive lines shipped separately. Hurst fabricated special motor mounts, suspension, steering, and other components, and completed the assembly. All of Chrysler's heavy-duty components were used, like Dana rear ends, heavy-duty ignition, and a Mopar super stock battery, relocated to the trunk for better weight distribution. Hemi Darts were slimmed down a couple 100 pounds less than their stock weight by installing fiberglass hoods and front fenders, gutting the doors and installing lightweight glass, and lightweight front bucket seats. The cars were delivered to the racers through selected Dodge dealers without a finished paint job, and needless to say, no warranty of any kind. The race Hemi was a triumph of Chrysler engine development in the 60s. Two Carter AFB 4-barrel carburetors on an aluminum cross ram intake manifold, a solid lifter camshaft, a forged crank and rods, and 12.5-to-1 compression were the starting points. The race teams took it from there, making the race Hemi's conservative rating of 500 horsepower a complete joke.
You could make a stock Hemi with unported cylinder heads, no more bigger bore than 60 over. You could run any camshaft, and you had to run a stock intake manifold, make 725 horsepower.
Driving a Hemi Dart was a true heart-stopping experience. Dropping the hammer on all this horsepower in such a light car could really get your attention.
I mean, you hit the throttle on that thing and it will scare you. You put somebody in it that's never been in a muscle car, it'll hurt them. They want out.
Hurst cranked out about 80 Hemi Darts and an additional 50 or so Darts with the 440 wedge motor. Not very many to go around. By 1969, the Dart had several reputations. It was a sporty car with a racy small block, a street cruiser with a torquey 383 big block, and a monster machine with Hemi or 440 Magnum power. But its image as an economy car was still on the books at most insurance companies. With premium rates on the rise for just about anything with a V8 and a 4-speed, this was a blessing. So when something's working, you go with it, right? We'll show you how Dodge continued to make the Dart even stealthier when the American muscle car returns. By late 1969, this muscle car thing was like a snowball rolling downhill. Everything was getting bigger, faster, more expensive, except the Dodge Dart. Dodge realized the things that had made the Dart a success, good horsepower and sporty looks at a low price, still worked. So why not go around again with another car that offered even more of the same? The 1970 Dart Swinger was, believe it or not, a low-buck Dart, but without any low-buck look or feel. Dodge gave it a base price of just $25.79 and packed it with all the go-fast goodies, like the Hypo 340 and a Hurst-shifted 3-speed manual trans as standard equipment. The same basic Dart body shell was upgraded with new styling, and new Ram-style hood scoops fed cold air to the 340. Dodge's Scat Pack Bumblebee stripes wrapped around the tail, just to let everyone know that this car had some sting. The Swinger's new low price didn't scale back its interior one bit. And with Dodge's range of colors, everything from plum crazy to Hemi orange, the Dart Swinger was way too cool to be called an economy car. The 1970 Swinger was the most popular Dart yet, with almost 120,000 cars built. By now, though, this body style had been around for 4 years, and it was due for an upgrade. But where do you go from such a popular shape? Well, if you're Dodge, you look next door at Plymouth. The Plymouth Duster had debuted to massive success, not only as a successor to the Valiant, but with a 340 engine, the world's next great small block muscle car. Dodge said, anything you can do, we can do better, and borrowed this body style for 1971. naming it the Dart Demon and packing it with all the stuff that had made the Dart a people-pleasing muscle car. The 340 Demon was the 70s version of a 60s favorite.
For 1971, Dodge continued to offer performance in the A-body line with the Demon 340. As always, you got the visual impact that made the muscle car era so famous, and you got good performance with the 340 under the hood. But as always, there's something more. If the standard 1971 Demon 340 wasn't hot enough for you, all you had to do was take a trip to Mr. Norm's Grand Spalding Dodge in Chicago, Illinois. He offered a special version called the GSS. What that included was a hotter camshaft, some valve train changes, and of course the crowning glory, 3 two-barrel Holley carburetors on an aluminum intake manifold.
NHRA's new Pro Stock competition was a showcase for Demons and Dusters. Mopar's drag racing teams wasted no time in squeezing more performance out of the new A-body cars than the Dart had ever cranked out. While the Demon carried on as Dodge's new high-performance compact, the Dart was relegated back to its humble economy car roots, with only slant 6 power or motivation from the low-performance 318 V8. The world had moved on, and a younger crowd of muscle car fans had found a new favorite low-buck rocket ride. But as the 70s progressed and unleaded fuel and insurance pressures continued to increase, even the high-performance Demon finally succumbed. After 1972, the aggressive Demon nickname was dropped in favor of a more vanilla Dart Sport model name. And by 1973, the only V8 offered in the Dart was the 318. Gone forever were the 340 and 383 fun engines, and the Hemi and the 440 were just dim but fond memories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on the American Muscle Car. Remember, don't crush them, restore them.